God wants us always to turn back to Him with contrition, to turn back to Him with trust. Hello everyone, I'm Father James Kelleher with Liturgy Prep for Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. Today in Romans we heard these words, quote, "Sin must not reign over your mortal bodies so that you obey their desires." And then Paul goes on to say, "Rather, present yourselves to God as raised from the dead to life." You know, there really is a raging battle going on between good and evil, isn't there? It's raging. We can see it outside of ourselves, but we also experience it inside of ourselves. You know, every day as we walk through the day, the devil is trying to tempt us. He's trying to knock us off course. And there's one particular virtue that can help us a lot in winning this battle. What virtue is that? It's humility. When we have humility, we recognize that we cannot win this battle alone. We need God. God is our Father and He looks kindly upon us, but He doesn't force Himself on us. A second aspect of humility is recognizing that God is infinitely more powerful than the devil. I'm going to repeat that. Recognizing that God is infinitely more powerful than the devil. Why is that so important? Because sometimes we fall. And when we fall, what's the devil's approach? He wants to say, "Hey man, you fell so bad, you're never going to get up from this." He wants us to despair. But God wants us always to turn back to Him with contrition, to turn back to Him with trust, to recognize that God is indeed infinitely more powerful than the devil. And that when God forgives sins, He washes them away, gives us a fresh start, and He strengthens us to move forward. You know, someone who had a lot of trust in God was Saint Therese of Lisieux. Her feast day is October 1st. Saint Therese entered the Carmelite monastery at the age of 15, and she entered with a great love for God. And she was a young woman with a lot of passion for doing good things for God. She wanted to be like the apostles. She wanted to be a martyr. She wanted to be a great teacher. But God had called her to be a contemplative nun. So she said, "Well, what's my mission then as a contemplative nun?" And one day she was searching the scriptures and she read St. Paul, the 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 13, where St. Paul talks about love and that the greatest of all virtues is love. And Therese, a light went on for Therese. She realized that she could be love in the heart of the church by putting love into everything that she did. And so that's what she did. Even in small things, she would put as much love as she could. She also, as she did her work, she learned that not to let other people knock her off track. And so, for instance, they had to wash their habits regularly, and they had a big wash basin, and the nuns would be surrounding the wash basin, and they'd all be washing away. Well, invariably, the nun across from St. Therese loved to appear like she was accidentally splashing St. Therese, but it was happening so often it was no longer an accident. Well, what was St. Therese's response? She just looked at the nun with a smile. It certainly had to have had an effect on that nun. And it certainly was helping St. Therese to grow in patience, to grow in kindness. Another example of how she let negative situations be a positive for her was, for a fair length of time, she had the responsibility of pushing a nun in a wheelchair all around the monastery, to the chapel, to the kitchen. And so if Therese was trying to be careful in pushing her slowly, the elderly nun would say, "Could you please go faster?" And then if Therese started going faster, the elderly nun would go, "Would you slow down a little bit? That's too fast." Well, nothing Therese did could satisfy this nun. But instead of getting exasperated and just, complaining, Therese just smiled. And she tried to just continue in the kindly way that she was. Well, this developed a heroic virtue in St. Therese. But you know what happened when St. Therese died? Her superiors had asked her to write an autobiography in the last year and a half of her life, and she did. Well, that autobiography got distributed to Carmelite convents around the world, and the nuns read it. But the autobiography was so good and powerful and inspiring that they started sharing it with lay people. And lay people started sending letters into the monastery talking about how they were asking St. Therese to protect their aunt that was going in for a serious operation, to help their uncle come back to the church. All these miracles and conversions were being reported. And so St. Pius X, who was the Pope around this time, he made a declaration one day. He said that St. Therese was the greatest saint of modern times. Ave Maria.